Okay, and I will let them in if you guys are ready. And this one's
Yeah.
on honesty. Here we go.
Good afternoon, my friends. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making a little bit of time. I would say spare time, but there's no such thing. Thank you for a few thoughtful moments. I've said before on earlier conversations that these are dark times for our society. This is a cold time for our society. And indeed, this is not only a cold time, but a dark time. And it's important, I think, to take that moment away from a barrage of information and reflect, because being honest with yourself is one of the most important aspects of being considerate. I very much thank everyone for your time this afternoon, and most of all, I want to thank Semjaka and Christopher for joining me to help foster the conversation. Without anything further from me, because I already talked a little bit longer than I really need to, Christopher, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started. Thank you.
Sure. So I guess we're going to start off with honesty. I guess to start off, just maybe not like just a definition, but like what resonates with me with it. I guess when I think honesty, you touched it a little bit, but it was the inward look. Like when you think it everyone thinks it's like that super simple two-way where it's just not lying to someone, but it goes so much deeper, and it's really it's how you grow. It's how you get better as a person when you use that honesty to look inwards. So I think that would be that's probably the most outstanding to me there. And then honesty within everyone that you know, because it's the core of the relationship that you have with just about everyone you react with on a daily basis, big or little. So yeah, started off small right there. That's I think that's how yeah.
That's a fantastic place to start. I particularly like what you said about how you grow as a person. I'm absolutely still working on this one. The number of times just in the past year or decade that I've caught myself going, oh, wait a minute, I do that.
Yeah, for sure. If you're not working on that, you're doing something wrong. I mean, there's always some little detail you can square up there.
Yeah. Does anybody else have thoughts you want to add, things that you think resonate with each or one of you?
I think a lot of it has to do, sorry, I'm wearing a mud mask. I look weird, so give me 10 more minutes and I'll look normal again. I think honesty requires a good amount of bravery. It's really easy for people to be halfway honest. Like, oh yeah, I kind of sugarcoated it, but I sugarcoated it. Sometimes, depending on the situation, that you're doing worse by sugarcoating it than just being brave enough to just say, hey, I'm going to tell you no, and this is why, blah, 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 blah. But it also, it does require a good amount of tact, which I personally don't possess. So, and I just wanted to make that point that it's hard to be honest, and it takes a lot of courage to be honest in the right situation. So, yeah.
Very good points.
I think it also has to do with being intentional about the things that we say. You don't have to say everything that comes into your head in order to be honest. But you do have to think about what you say and what you tell people and live your life in a way that is truthful.
Don't say everything is, I think, a core principle. And I'm sure there are people who can say most of the things they think. But that's not me, and it's not most people I know.
Something that I like that was touched on before was what was it? It was mentioned. It takes bravery to truly be honest. There, something that kind of got me thinking with that is, it does take a lot of bravery in that situation, but it takes really the whole ring of it, because it takes a little bit of courtesy in there. It takes like when you get that mix of them, how can you hold your own integrity, be tactful, and be honest at the same time? And there's going to be situations out there where you can't do all of those at once, and you have to kind of have that context to decide which one's best. So yeah, that's an aspect of it I really enjoy. It's pretty much as broad as you want it.
So there's always been a standard that I've had in my life that I kind of go forward with everything. And it's the rule of 2 of 3, which is it honest? Is it kind? And is it necessary? If it doesn't take at least 2 of those things, then probably it's not worth saying. If it's honest and it's not necessary and it's cruel, don't say it. If it's honest and it may be a harsh truth, but it's necessary, then it's something worth saying. And that's, at least for me, in terms of that, that's always the standard I go by. It's honesty for the sake of honesty when it's going to hurt something and not improve anyone's life is, it loses the value of just being honest at that point.
Can I ask a question?
By all means, Jaka, go ahead.
I'd like to ask if people can give some specific examples. And the reason I'm asking this is because yesterday, many of us saw that there was somebody who, quote, spoke honestly, spoke openly, spoke their truths. And I'm talking about Galen of Bristol. From his perspective. But reactions to him, by and large, did not see what he spoke as truth. And yet there were people who thought that, who said, I agree with you. You speak for me. Thanks for being brave. Thanks for standing up and speaking up. He was praised using exactly those words. So what kind of examples are we talking about here?
I think that example in particular uses unkindness as a very broad brush. And Faustus, I liked your balance of the 3 things. And I would say that I'm just going to use that right now, because I think that Galen's personal truths were unkind to a significant number of people and unnecessary for him to share his personal truths.
Hopefully no one minds, so I'll jump in. I think Atrox really hit the nail on the head early on. Honesty isn't just about how you interact with others. Honesty is a very personal thing. In the instance of Galen, he was outwardly honest. He told us all exactly how he felt. Kudos to him for having done so. I think, however, he has not been very honest with himself. Given the virtues that he chose to espouse and the opinions that he associated with them, I think they're highly disconnected. And I think that's because he has not been honest with himself.
You bring up a good point with this idea of being honest with yourself. And it's something that I think I've walked away with almost from every one of these sessions is times where I failed to meet these virtues, times where I could have handled a situation better, times where, if I'm being honest with myself, where I could have done better and in the future I need to do better. So this sort of inward honesty is
thank you, Yurik. It's difficult to say that you embrace the virtues the way that we've been discussing them, the highest ideals, that you truly embrace inclusivity, and in the same breath say that you don't believe that homosexuals and gay people should be allowed to be married. It's a lie, and you're lying to somebody. You're either lying to me or you're lying to yourself. You can lie to me as much as you like. That's fine. But somewhere in there, there's a lie, and I'm not certain who it's being told. I don't think that it just can't be true. If you believe in inclusivity, I think that has to apply to everybody. Now, I've taken us way off the happy path, but I do want to highlight the point that there's a lack of honesty. It's maybe harsh to call it a lie. There's an obfuscation in there. There's something that you're allowing yourself to be blind to. Hopefully that kind of highlights the personal honesty that at least for me, is important to improve as a person.
At the risk of, Lucian, I appreciate your perspective on that, and I agree with you. At the risk of taking us further off the track, I would say that it could be very easy to determine whether, without, I used Faustus's 3 criteria to analyze it in my opinion, and that's a lot of what the conversations about virtues are, is to hone your own opinion about how these help you to improve. And I think that if you broaden that to the virtues being related, then perhaps Galen of Bristow spoke his untruth, but it does not support some of the other ideals that Lucian just mentioned. And in terms of courtesy, that adds a second layer of why was that unnecessary to say? Because it's hurtful and it is not inclusive. So yeah, that takes us a little ways off the beaten path and into the each one of the virtues is related.
This is Gustav. I'd like to share my screen for a second. Something we haven't done in this session much, but hopefully I don't make you blind with all this fine text here. But this is the website that we've referred to many times in this session, and this is Duke Garrick's essay on the virtues. And talking about honesty, right here, the part of this that really struck out to me in this conversation, he says, in the SCA, the man's word is his bond, as it should be. All people should guard against swearing lightly, and what is sworn must be done. So also should one be honest in witness. And here's the part I love. Be careful not to let your feelings about something become fact in your speech. Oh, here, let me move the little Brady Bunch there. Most importantly, a knight should always be honest with himself, to Lucian's point on the topic, and not let excuses or wishes color one's belief. And I think that really strikes on what we're talking about right now. Really, honesty, I think another word that we could be using here is objectivity. As a knight, seeking out the truth is important, but to do that, you got to be objective. Anyway, just something that I thought I'd share, and I will be happy to, if you guys don't already have this bookmark somewhere, I will put this in the Zoom chat.
I just did that.
Oh, okay. Beat me to it. Yep.
Thank you, Gustav. That
Mhm.
that is a valuable reference. And anybody who thinks that it's the only reference for the virtues hasn't been following along, because there are so many. And it's why this is not a presentation on a virtue. It's a conversation about all the virtues. You can find shorter lists and longer lists of virtues. You can find different definitions. But the area that I believe is most valuable to all of us in this conversation, and in truth beyond this group, is that the common areas that everyone agrees has a grain of truth are truly valuable to all of us as humans. Whew. Somebody else say something,
Hirsch, may I?
please.
As I was getting ready for this, I popped up some things and was looking at truthfulness, which in the virtues was veritas. Veritas can be said to be the culmination of all the virtues put together, and what we are striving for is the truth, which we have all been sort of dancing around. And that was one definition. And another I came up with is from another wonderful podcast called The Everyday Night. It's from Duke Eliyahu and Duke Dag Thorgrimsson from the Middle Kingdom. And they have a podcast. And in chapter 17, they have honesty. And the blurb that went along with it, I think, is good for where we are. Honesty is truthful, veritas, and honor. These are all words that describe aspects of honesty. We recognize honesty as a core virtue, as it is a necessary component when striving for nearly all of the other virtues. Being honest with others is necessary for trust. Being honest with oneself is vital to growth. So for me, that was where I'm looking at honesty. Yes, as we've been saying in reference to Galen of Bristol, he was honest from his perspective and his emotion and his point of view. But is that honest? That may be honest to himself, but not to the outer world at large. And that's where both what Gustav just came up with and what I have said comes up with. Honesty is two-edged, much like a sword. It is what you are able to give yourself and what you are able to offer a larger component and a larger society, in which I believe we as the knights are the arbiters of culture and are what many people and the peerage, all the peerages, are what people in many ways hope to be the acme of not opinion, but of courtesy and gentility. And my brain just ran out of ideas. So there, Naya, Naya, Naya.
This is Logan. I think that for me, one of the things that we all need to keep in mind is that honesty is not truth. Honesty is being true to oneself, being true to your beliefs. That does not make it true for everyone else. So I think that not being on Facebook, I had no knowledge about this entire blow up until it was mentioned to me this morning. And so I think that Galen was most likely being very honest about the way he felt, and that's fine. He can feel that way. He cannot, however, make the rest of us feel that way, because our truth is different than his truth, even though we are all being honest about the way we feel.
Well said, Logan. Very concise.
It's also obviously stifled the conversation about honesty.
Well, I was going to bring up a point on honesty, really more of just a reflection, since to kind of pick things back up. I've been thinking on this for a while, and you know, what makes honesty difficult is the challenges that you must face in making the correct actions or making the correct choices. And sometimes it's not easy. And like I had some folks that were fairly new that were camped with my group at Lily's, and the rest of the group asked me to uninvite them for the next year, and I had to do this as a representative of our group. And I was honest with them that their members of their household or their group were not a good fit with ours, and that their invite had been rescinded for the next year. And this caused some problems, obviously, because they felt like they got along fairly well, but behind the scenes that was not the case, and I had to do this. But because I expressed it in a situation or in a mannerism that said, look, it's for the best of everybody, because if this was to continue, matters would be worse. And that it's not a personal slight against them. It's just that personalities don't mix, and that's okay. It just, I'm sorry, it just didn't work out. And those people were upset at the time it happened, but now we remain friends to this day, or at least associates, I would say. We're on good terms. They moved on and found a place that is more aligned to their goals and their objectives within this society. And I think it worked out. It's just, it's tough because, you want to help new people out. You want to help everybody out if you can, but you've got to be honest with yourself about your limitations and the limitations of those that you've made promises to, i.e. your households, your best friends, royalty, whatever it may be, and to protect those people that you find dear and close to you. And I think this kind of encompasses the purpose of this discussion in my mind, and that's my truth or my honesty. So do with that as you may. But yeah, it's not a hard choice sometimes, but often it really is.
That's a good one. Okay. And I can relate very much to your comments about a group of people saying, hey, don't have these people camp with us next year. It's really hard. Group dynamics can be really difficult to find what in your opinion, the best fit for everyone is. And that's, when you're the person that invited a bunch of people, it's your responsibility. I'm going to go back to something Christopher said about honesty being an opportunity for personal growth. After Magdalena and I stepped down as Baron and Baroness at Three Rivers, I started fighting in Crown Tournament. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be great. And after about 3 or 4 Crown tournaments, on the drive home, I had that moment of honesty where I was like, oh, I'm not going to just sign up and show up and win. I'm going to have to work at this. And that was absolutely a moment that it honestly took 6 more years after that for it to actually work for me. So it's not something where one light bulb moment of honesty will necessarily carry you through to your next goal or whatever improvement you're looking for. It's a lot of work.
Marion here, and in the arts and science context, a lot of times your kind of asked for honesty in situations like judging, or somebody brings you their art and says, "Hey, how is this?" And you really have to temper your honesty in these kind of situations and be both truthful to help them grow, but also kind enough so that they want to grow and do better.
That is a fantastic balance, Marion. Thank you for bringing that comment up. I've been privy to conversations like that before, and that was very concise. Honest, truthful enough to help them grow, but kind enough to encourage it is a fantastic balance. Thank you for that comment.
Can I chime in here?
By all means, Richard.
Richard Larmer from Eldemere, and always been interested in the virtues, and we also need to know the vices. I'm not going to talk about lying here, so to speak. So this has been really enjoyable conversation. One thing we need to think about on honesty too is, and it's been alluded to already, is the honesty with ourselves, but our honesty when no one's looking. You know, it's obviously when you're looking someone in the eye and you're telling them something, you know, yes, I did this or I didn't do that. That's kind of an obvious, you know, you're telling the truth or you're not telling the truth, or you're giving partial truth, which in some ways is dishonest. But when we're all in positions where, you know, there's that famous poster, you know, it's broken. Did you break it? Yes. Did anyone see you? No. You're good, right? In other words, you know, you can say, well, I didn't break it because no one was watching. Well, the honest person, and I think you got it with bring in modern American history, you know, George Washington and the cherry tree, right? Did you chop it down? Yes, I did, because I can't tell a lie. But there's lots of things that you would get away with. I think we all have things in our lives where you know that no one's ever going to check. You know, fudging a number on an income tax return, let's say.
Very
That
good
might be
comment.
honest,
Thank you, Richard.
right? So maybe it's a good example there, but we need to be honest. We can do our best to be honest all the time, even when no one's looking. So it's hard though.
I think being honest with yourself is a real aspect that, especially, and I would say like heavy combat in the SCA is a really important part. I mean, because say after a fight you walk away and you don't quite know how it went. You have to really be able to level yourself and see if you did chuck that, or if the bruise will tell you later. But I mean, if that's the kind of fighter you want to remain, and that's the kind of fighter you want to be. So you gotta you gotta use that to make yourself better.
Yeah, and Duke Oswald used to say, "Are you a knight in the grocery store?" I mean, that's something that's outside of the SCA, but it's are you still being true to the virtues? And only you're going to know that, so it's being honest to yourself. And then, what Chris, relating to what Christopher just said, it's like, even down to your own armor, it's like, we all know what a Marshall pacification device is. It's like, yes, I have a half gauntlet that sort of meets the criteria. But, are you honestly meeting the criteria, or is it just something, something that you you can get away with? And so we need to be honest with ourselves on all aspects of what we're doing in our activities. I'm sure there's something that would relate to the arts and sciences on that, but I can't think of anything right now. So.
Well, I think the way I would relate it to arts and sciences would simply be, are you being honest in your research? Are you yes, you saw this one thing in this one illumination and did the thing because you thought it was cool, and that's cool and that's great. I'm glad you did the thing. Did you look at other sources? And I think that's
that's how I would try to keep myself honest, is I looked at multiple things to try to justify the means of what I'm doing.
I guess if you're trying to justify a particular thing as being common when you're using an outlier to justify it. So
Like, thanks for Verena here. I was like, thanks for bringing that up, Maria. I think about this a lot. I do research in the society. I do research as my day job. I have done extensive coursework on research ethics. And it's a concept that I call intellectual honesty. And every source we look at has its own shortcomings. It is incomplete in some way or another. It may be biased. It's probably biased in some way or another. As one example, it was very common for Victorians to, quote, touch up Elizabethan works of art. And so you find that. You say, man, this is a great gown, or this is a great look at the makeup of the period. And until you find out that other fact, you don't understand the limitations on that piece of evidence that you found. And so in the end, what we're doing as researchers, and even as people who are trying to sort out the modern world by reading a series of news articles, is that we are not simply collecting facts, we're building webs of understanding, and everything we learn is hopefully helping us to assess each new piece of information with greater scrutiny, with better understanding. And I think we mentioned the idea of objectivity earlier, and I think it's a good concept. We spent there's a lot of research into the nature of human biases and how to mitigate that. But I don't think objectivity is an ideal to be approached. It's not something that you can ever truly, completely have. And I think it's a star dangling up in the sky. It's not something that we can ever pick up and put in our pockets and claim to have completely.
Verena, I very much admire your description of objectivity. It meshes with my principle to always strive, because there's always an improvement in reaching for the ideals. Thanks.
I just wanted to mention, as what Verena said, happens a lot in the armoring community. When you have somebody recreating a piece that's in a private collection, and only to come to find out later that everything they recreated was based on a Victorian recreation of that one single piece of armor. So yeah, knowing your sources and knowing and doing your due diligence on research can be incredibly important.
And I think part of that isn't simply coming to the table, having read everything or know everything, but it's a sense of being very open to take in that new information and to grow with it.
I think this also comes into when you're judging arts and sciences, being aware of the fact that, as Verena and Duncan have said, that your level of knowledge versus the person you were judging, there may be two separate truths there, which come back to Logan's, your perspective is in some ways your truth. One of my things on early armor was there's a late 14th century coat of plates in the Metropolitan Museum that was everywhere. And it is found to be totally made up Victorian. And I still have a little figure on the wall of my one true harness, and the outline is of that. But over some odd years, I found out this is ever so much different than what that one piece that I thought it was. And having judged arts and sciences and teaching theater in college, I find that as a new person, you're like, I have found the one holy grail, and here's the one, as you said, the one picture of it that will show exactly what I'm thinking. And as both a teacher and a more experienced artist or mentor, going, no, here's a wider range of options. Would you be amenable to looking at all of those? Could be another way of looking at honesty, because you are innocent and ignorant.
Semjaka, I want to tie 2 points together. When Verena said being open to a different perspective, and when you close with, the parts that you are ignorant of, that there's always something that you're ignorant of, are really vital to continuing to learn. And I consider myself a lifelong learner. And when I get too tired, I shut down and I stop learning. And, learning to recognize when I have stopped being open, it's like, oh, I need to take a break.
I have to check myself a lot. And I've gotten better about it. It may not look like it, but and I think, yeah, I'm the same way. My filter, if I'm in a compromised situation, whether that be I'm exhausted or I'm stressed out or I'm drunk, I tend to, my filter is a sieve, and it gets sievier the more compromised I get. So, it's really hard to check yourself. And I admire people who do that a lot better than I do.
One of the points of honesty for me over the years has been going that I may know more than the person I'm talking to, but they may not be ready for the wall of information that I am throwing at them, because I am wildly enthusiastic about this. I am better than I used to be, but I still inundate the people I'm talking to with meaningless minutia.
And it's in the like when you're looking at like the costuming world, for example, and you see, it's like anything we really do in the SCA. There's always going to be more than one way to do something. And I think it's really important to keep that open mind and think, okay, well, that was really cool that you did it this way. And then just try to do like a nerd out spin on it and say, I'm going to show you how I do it. And then we can, try to, not only will hopefully I or the other person will learn something, but it will also kind of support the whole idea of keeping your eyes open and thing. I don't know where I was going with that. It sounded better in my head. I'm sorry.
I think personally for me, one of the most, I guess, difficult parts with honesty is I especially, to go back to, I guess, my area of comfort, which is fighting, is when someone is honest with you and you're ready for that honesty, but you don't know how to incorporate it into what you're doing. I had a higher level fighter than myself say, you know what, you are just plateaued right now. You need to do something to get out of your comfort zone, and having that honesty and knowing in yourself that that's something you need, but lacking the ability to get to the next step is where I think honesty becomes very, very difficult, I guess, is the knowing where you are lacking, accepting it into yourself, but not knowing how to fix it.
Call it getting humble. You got to get humble, to be honest.
I mean, I'm the most humble, just the absolute most humble.
Never met anyone more humble.
You should add that on to your name, Faustus.
Hands are huge.
The most humble.
Biggest feet.
I'll see about changing my cognomen. I mean, Lupus is getting a little old, so.
So I feel like, if I can add something, my perception of honesty, especially dealing with other people, and it kind of echoes what everyone else has been saying, but it's the intent. So is my intent to use my honesty as a weapon, in which case it's most likely bad, or is my intent to use my honesty as a tool, my intent being to better that person? I think that's a key distinction, because some people will use their honesty as a weapon to hurt people if they don't care about them or whatever. Whereas if somebody tells you, in terms of fighting, if your rap shot sucks, do this and this, that honesty was valuable if the intent there is to make you better. If it's just to discourage you, then that's the bad form. In terms of self-honesty, I don't think that can be wrapped up in such a nice, neat bow, because it's just way more complicated being honest with yourself, I feel like.
Brinky, thank you for those comments. That you put a lot of different things into that brief set of statements, and one of them very clearly resonates with me. When somebody comes up to you and says, "Oh, that rap shot sucks," that's a failure of courtesy on their part. It may be an excess of honesty, but it fails to meet the ideals, in my opinion, or the characteristics that Faustus presented regarding kindness, because there's better ways to present that. But the other comment I wanted to make about that level of honesty is that we're a very open and honest kingdom, sometimes to our detriment once in a while. But I was in another kingdom, and there were 3 or 4 people around who had really good advice, and they were utterly silent about giving me fighting advice until I asked one of them. And then they were, ready to help with concise and helpful and kind comments. But in some kingdoms, you won't get any fighting advice until you ask for it. And it's a different cultural norm.
I think I've noticed, like, in the equestrian community, especially, it's I don't have any very active equestrians around me, right? So unfortunately, the people who were playing don't really play much anymore. So what I realized going to Gulf Wars, where there are a lot of other equestrians, because we're a very small community here in Calontir, I found the most I learned from other equestrians were actually from people from a different kingdom, where they were willing to come up to me and say, "Hey, try doing this," or "Hey, that was really cool. Here's another way to do it too." And and when I was doing mounted combat, it was somebody as simple as telling me, "Get the hell out of your head," and start smiling, which again, someone not from this kingdom. So so it was interesting, I thought, that there were so many people who were more approaching. And I really, really wish that, I think I myself need to take that as an example and exercise that example as best as I can, and learn tact all at the same time to try to better our equestrian community here in Calontir, because it's something that we need. I mean, we need people, who are willing to say, "This was really cool," and try to lift everybody up, try to make everyone be better. And I think that's really important. So so that for me is a personal goal, to make myself better and try to make it as contagious as possible, I guess.
So the point, Hirsch, you mentioned about the sort of interkingdom anthropology on why there's some level of some places you really don't tell people advice on their fighting till they ask, or vice versa. Really, I see that. I lived in Atlanta first, and that was definitely becoming much more the case, and that tends to be stemming out of both one, people using their advice to perhaps not be kind, or people providing advice that was bad, but it's part of some shifts, and I think even generational clashes on the points of sort of consent and whether people have been bullies with it in the past is sort of what's being expressed in some of that weirdness, that some places it's really not okay to provide advice and you'll be seen as a jerk for doing it. In some places you'd be seen as a jerk for not offering it. There's a lot of stuff going on with that, I suppose, is where you have to be careful. So I guess sort of to throw a couple queries out related to that, like what ways could you see that flip side being an aspect of honesty that's the different perspective in our kingdom?
I'm going to take just one piece that you said, Gavin, and I apologize if I'm taking, not the core piece, but when you said that sometimes people were being bullies with their advice, that resonates with me in a bad way. And I try to be vigilant and not just about fighting. If somebody is being a jerk, they're being a jerk, and there are things that you can do conversationally to try to diffuse that, or to try to step in front of it and take the brunt of it and reject it, to rebuff it on them as an opportunity for that person to potentially recognize that they need to grow. It's in my personal experience, my personal truth, I most frequently find myself thinking, oh gosh, I wish I'd said something. What exactly would I have said? And it's too late. I've missed my moment. And that is an area where I will always strive to have a word to diffuse a really harsh or bitter conversation, and to try to bring it to a better place, a place where people are thinking more openly and can grow from the conversation, instead of just leave feeling sort of ugh.
No, I think that the bullying aspect is definitely central to what I was trying to word salad together there, especially as it pertains to, I think, women fighters, especially get that used against them.
I think being a female fighter sometimes, for me personally, I'm already in my head, right? Like I step out on the field, I'm already in my head in a really bad way. And it's really hard for me to, and the entire time, and I don't know if you've ever seen my face, because masks you can't really see people's face in a mask, but I have the worst RBF face when I'm fighting, the absolute worst, for the simple fact that I am in my head and I am trying to get out of my head this entire time. And for me, I understand when there are certain people who will come up to me and say things, and I know that they have every good intention, and I know that, and for the most part, the people that come up to me are my friends, and I know they're good people. But it's really hard sometimes in certain situations to be given advice as warranted and as kind and well presented as it may be. So a lot of times it's really difficult in that sense for someone to get advice, and I constantly have to, I've never really been bullied necessarily. And it's people have teased me, but then I've just teased them right back, so it's fine. But I think it's really difficult for female fighters because they get a bad rep, and I think a lot of them sometimes are in the same position I'm in, where we have a negative reaction to something that's positively presented, and it comes from a place of growth only because we're working crap out in our head all at the same time, and it becomes overwhelming. So yeah,
unsolicited advice is not always appreciated, and so I think what a lot of times when we get, you know, and I say we in terms of the chivalry or upper level fighters or whoever get accused of not teaching, it's usually because of years of giving unsolicited advice that was not appreciated. And you know, we need to learn to simply ask the question. It's like, you know, are you looking for advice, or are you looking for a fight, or are you looking for you know, do you want to know how I hit you in the head 5 times? You know, it's but you know, if they say no, then you know,
and
okay.
I've totally done that, where he's asked me at practice, do you want to know why I'm doing this? I'm like, no, I don't care right now.
Yeah, I mean, because you know, she's not in a place where, you know, she can listen
or learn,
and so it's like, okay, well, we'll put a pin in that and talk about that later, which is also one of the reasons why I am not her primary instructor, because that
would be weird.
That would be weird, yeah. But you know, going back to the honesty thing, you know, I think as teachers, and since several of you are teachers, then, you know, in, you know, outside of the SCA, then, you know, it's a matter of trying to determine, you know, what your student is ready to hear. You know, it doesn't make any sense to teach, you know, high blow mechanics and high theory to a brand new fighter, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to, you know, be pedantically you know, lost the word, but to try to teach high level fighters to make it sound like you think they're dumb, so they need a remedial course. Although remedial courses can come in really handy for all of us, just saying. But yeah, trying to pull that back into honesty. Not sure if I did or not.
One thing I would ask about that is, if someone is breaking rule number 1 and they don't know that they're breaking rule number 1, don't you think we have an obligation to say bluntly and honestly, you're doing this, you shouldn't, in our game?
I think it depends on the person. Some people need you to be blunt. I mean, you know, I have certain people who, you know, subtlety is not the way to get a point across, and so you just have to be blunt. Other people, if you're that blunt, then you might, you know, especially if they're a newer fighter, a newer person, then you might not see them anymore. You know, it's like, so you kind of have to gauge your audience. But yeah, I mean, if somebody's doing something just blatantly dickish, then you know, we all need to be able to step up and say, stop doing that.
John Lupo, I very much agree with your comment. If somebody is being a jerk, we all have an obligation as we feel it. If you actually don't feel like somebody's being a jerk, then maybe your obligation is less. And if you feel like somebody really needs to stop and, receive just a polite verbal little, do you know what you sound like? Then absolutely. That is very helpful, and it can be very empowering if you're in a circle of 4 or 5 people, all ranks and ages, and somebody's being a jerk, and you say, I really think you should stop and think what you're saying and what you sound like. There's going to be people in that circle who are relieved that someone spoke to them, whether it's the perfect ideal of calling somebody out as politely as you can, or whether it's really just, at least I said something. And I admire when that happens, because as I said a few moments ago, all too often I find myself later thinking, oh, I should have said a thing. And that is how it goes for me. Does anybody have any other specific questions? We are, I wouldn't say we're winding down, but we've covered a lot of valuable topics, and my intention is to never truly exhaust the conversation with these. I am going to close, as I have before, with a thing and a toast, and I'm going to pour some tea so that it will be a little bit cooler after I talk about a thing. We all have a lot of things from the SCA. This is a knife that I won very early in my SCA career, and I remember this with much fondness because the tournament in Batavia was not a tournament that I won. It was a judged tournament where people liked how I fought, the flowery things that I said, which frankly, I don't remember what I said. But I had fun on the field, and that was visible to the people who awarded me with this knife. It is not a fantastic knife. I could do a better job taking care of it. I could write down who made it for me. But it is perhaps the first tournament prize that I still have handy today, and it is helpful to me to remind myself that somebody put a lot of time and work into this. And in all honesty, did I deserve this prize? No. There were people who fought way better than I did, but it wasn't that kind of tournament. And it was up to the ladies in the gallery to judge who was deserving. And I'm almost as humble as Faustus to say that I'm very pleased that I was selected to carry that home from the tournament that day. But I'm even more pleased to see so many happy faces today. And thank you again for joining in the conversation, for continuing to listen, to talk, to question, and to think for yourselves, because that's all that I can hope for. And I certainly hope I continue to think about the things people here have said. To your health.
Thank
Now
you
it
for
just
another
makes me
great
curious who else
conversation.
drinking.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.